Well, welcome everyone. This is an exciting day. It's a day really long overdue. I'm tabling a vulnerable road users law bill. It actually was tabled yesterday. And today I'm joined with a number of folk who are going to be speaking about the necessity for the bill and why this bill. Certainly we heard an announcement from the government, but that's all we've heard, just an announcement. We haven't seen any legislation, and even in the announcement, the government does not go far enough. The purpose of this bill is to save lives, pure and simple, to save lives, and to reduce the number of injuries as well among vulnerable road users, and also to address the concerns of victims. A fine of $500 and a couple of demerit points, as Heather has so eloquently, sadly said, is not enough, and that's clear. What it includes is community service, license suspension, driver re-education, and it also requires a culpable motorist to attend the court for sentencing and actually be there when the victim impact statement is reiterated. So I'm going to move on to our wonderful panel and let you know a little bit about them and who is in the audience today. Certainly we have in the audience Kasia Bregman-Sampson and Yu Lee from Friends and Families for Safe Streets, Maureen Coyle and Daniela Levy-Pinto from Walk Toronto, Jared Kolb and Keegan Gartz from Cycle Toronto, Joseph Schwartz from Advocacy for Respect for Cyclists and Toronto Bike Network, Albert Cole from Bells on Bloor and Pedestrian and Cycling Death Review Council, Nancy Smith-Lee from Toronto Centre for Active Transportation, Melissa Dowry from Bike Law Canada. We're also supported, although she couldn't make it, by United Senior Citizens of Ontario, Alan Wayne Scott from Hoof and Cycle, Maisie LeBlanc, an advocate for vulnerable road users, wife of the late Eduardo LeBlanc, who was a cycling fatality. And our panelists, Patrick Brown, not a stranger on this issue at all, who's a safety advocate on behalf of Coalition for Vulnerable Road User Laws, David Stark from Friends and Families for Safe Streets, Heather Sim, who's the daughter of the late Gary Sim, who was killed in a cycling fatality. And we're going to start with Patrick Brown.
Thank you, Cheri. Vulnerable road user injuries and deaths are increasing in Ontario. Our laws, our system is outdated. It's no longer acceptable to have small fines handed out when somebody does an illegal driving maneuver and seriously injures or kills someone. Down in the United States, these laws are in at least 10 states. This is the most comprehensive vulnerable road user law in North America. It is the first in any province in Canada. It is an added penalty, and it is a penalty that applies that if you are convicted of a highway traffic offense, it's not limited to just one section. It's over 50 sections of infractions. And you kill or seriously injure a vulnerable road user, pedestrians, cyclists, first responders, you're going to be subject to an added penalty. And unfortunately, fines just are not acceptable. There must be something more. That includes community service. That's in this bill. Driving suspension, that's in this bill, as well as a driving course so that when you go back on the road, we know that you're a competent driver and this won't happen again. This is something that's been put together. It covers the loopholes. It doesn't allow people to plead out to lower and lesser included offenses to avoid these penalties. As I've said, it's a comprehensive bill. And the people that support this bill have been supporting it for over 2 years. They include some of the leading active transportation advocates in our city and their groups. It includes the United Senior Citizens of Ontario because there's been a disproportionate number of deaths of seniors walking on our streets. It is supported, more importantly, by those who have faced injustice such as David Stark, Heather Sim, Maisie LeBlanc, Yu Lee, Kasia Bregman-Sampson. All of them and others are here today in support of this bill. And I'll pass it at this stage to David Stark to say a few words.
Thank you, Pat. On behalf of Friends and Families for Safe Streets and my family, I would like to express my strong support for Cheri DiNovo's private member's bill to protect vulnerable road users. Nearly 3 years ago, on November the 6th, 2014, my wife, Erica Stark, mother of 3 young boys, was struck and killed by a driver of a minivan. Erica was standing on a sidewalk waiting to cross an intersection. The driver, Elizabeth Taylor, was charged and convicted of careless driving. The tragedy occurred just before 1 p.m. on a brisk, sunny day. There was no snow. The road was dry. The minivan was in good working order, and Ms. Taylor was in good health. She did not take the stand in traffic court to explain what happened. We know that she narrowly missed hitting people waiting at a bus stop. She crashed into a TTC bus stop sign, veered over the sidewalk and hit a traffic control box, then hit a traffic light pole, a pedestrian crosswalk pole, and then struck Erica, throwing her at a speed estimated by the collision reconstruction officer at between 25 and 40 kilometers per hour. And Ms. Taylor was traveling in a residential area where the posted speed limit was 50 kilometers an hour. Erica died at the crash site in the arms of a nurse who happened to drive by and stop to help. Ms. Taylor's sentence consisted of a $1,000 fine and 5 months of driving restrictions. She did not lose her license. She did not face any jail time. She was not required to take a driver education course, nor was she ordered to perform community service. To her credit, Ms. Taylor attended the traffic court proceedings, including the verdict and sentencing. She was present in court to hear my victim impact statement and the heartbreaking statements prepared by my 3 sons, who were 11, 9, and 6 at the time of their mother's senseless death. I support the Minister of Transportation's announcement last week regarding the government's intention to introduce legislation to improve the Highway Traffic Act. The new proposed charge of careless driving causing death or bodily harm with significant fines and penalties is needed to send a message to the driving public that they must focus their attention on the road. Cheri DiNovo's bill would provide additional penalties and measures for any and all charges in the Highway Traffic Act whenever a pedestrian, cyclist, or other vulnerable road user is killed or suffers severe injuries. Writing a victim impact statement is an emotionally draining and painful experience. It takes time, and many tears are shed in the process. Our system currently allows drivers charged with HTA offenses never to set foot in the courtroom. Many bereaved families have read their statements in court without the convicted driver present to hear them. This is unacceptable. Careless drivers must be held to account and hear how their moments of inattention have shattered families and forever altered lives. Cheri DiNovo's bill is a model vulnerable road user law. It builds upon the proposed improvements to road safety laws in Ontario announced by Ministers Stephen Del Duca and Eleanor McMahon last week. I hope that all 3 political parties will support these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Heather.
Thank you. My dad, Gary Sim, was hit and killed by a driver who did not care enough to take the most basic precautions on the street. The driver is currently still driving around with no limitations and nothing more than a minor charge and fine hanging over his head. Considering he caused a completely avoidable incident resulting in death, this should be a huge concern because he's clearly demonstrated his carelessness on the roads and his lack of caution for others. If this law had been in place when my dad was killed, the driver would have received a license suspension, would have had to take a driver safety education course, and there'd be much more than a $500 fine for him to worry about. This law will not bring my dad back or change results of his case, but going forward, hopefully other families will not have to experience what my family has gone through. And I'll feel much more comfortable with my mom and my sister cycling on these roads, knowing that there is a law out there protecting them. My dad's life was worth far more than just $500 and 2 demerit points.